Remember when stores had a Toys to Life section? Yeah, there was like a 10-year period where games like Disney Infinity and Amiibo took over the entire gaming section of any store. You might be wondering who this was for. Me. They were for me. It's not a secret that I'm a huge fan of the Toys to Life genre of games. In fact, one of the first videos in this series was about Disney Infinity, and ever since that video, I've wanted to make a video on Skylanders. Before going any further into this video, we need to go all the way back to the beginning with Spyro. On September 9th, 1998, we saw the release of Spyro the Dragon on the PlayStation. Now, Spyro has a long history as a character who could easily warrant his entire own video. But in order to keep some focus in this video, I figured it would make more sense for me to just talk about my own history with this character, which admittedly is not very much. You see, I was mainly a Nintendo fan growing up, so my first introduction was seeing the original game at my cousin's house. Outside of this, I'm pretty sure there was like a McDonald's Happy Meal toy, but overall, that was my introduction to Spyro. But even with so little experience with this character, I was still familiar with him, seeing and hearing about the character through new games being released, as well as crossovers with characters like Crash Bandicoot. This would obviously all change in 2011 with the release of... Yeah, in 2011 we would see the first Spyro game in years, Skylanders Spyro's Adventure. This game would introduce the world to a new genre of video games, Toys to Life games. This would be a genre of games where the player would be able to place a real-life action figure on the portal and then use that character in the video game. It was a unique way to do DLC, and I've got to be honest, it was super fun and exciting, especially during this first game. The story of this game sees the evil villain Chaos turning the Skylanders, protectors of Skylands, into toys, and it was your job as a portal master to save them. Saving them, of course, meaning buying hundreds of dollars worth of different action figures. But I've got to be honest, this is such a cool concept for a game. And it does just about everything great. It's super replayable, and it doesn't shock me how popular this game would become. The only complaints I have with this game is that you can't jump. It really does hurt the gameplay, as it's a feature that I feel the characters should have. And the lack of Spyro content in this game, even though it uses his name. The biggest references I noticed to Spyro in this game were a few Spyro characters and figures, and that the sheep from the Spyro games are everywhere. Remember these sheep because they're going to be important later. In this video, I'm going to do a little segment at the end of each game where I talk about my favorite Skylanders characters that were added or played a big part in that particular game, as well as some real-world Skylanders type stuff that was going around or going on in real life. So for Spyro's Adventure, my favorite characters were probably Eruptor and Wrecking Ball. And for the real-world promotion, there was a line of mini Skylanders called Sidekicks that you could get through packs of Frito-Lay chips. While they weren't playable in-game, they would follow your character around, and it is kind of fun to see that. With that being said, I think we should move on to the next installment. I'm not gonna lie, this is the worst Skylanders game. Every Skylanders game adds some new gimmick characters, which for giants are slightly larger figures. This game introduces the concept of Light Core Skylanders, which are Skylanders that light up. This time, the starter pack includes Jetvac, Cinder, and Tree Rex. One decision I've got to give the game props for is its backwards compatibility with all the previous Skylanders toys. But before we go any further, let's talk about the plot of Skylanders Giants. So basically, Chaos comes back to life after being turned into a toy at the end of the last game, and you fight him. Yeah, the story is not that deep in the earlier games. Probably the most interesting part of this game's plot is the ending of the game, which promises a Skylanders 3 that will include Chaos's mom. Overall, Skylanders Giants is probably my least favorite game in this series. The story is just weak, and I'm still bothered by the gameplay itself. This game needed the ability to jump. Really, the game just feels like a less interesting version of the original game, and the gimmick is not interesting enough to warrant a sequel. Now, before I move on to Skylander SWAT Force, I want to take a minute to talk about, just like I did with the first game, some of my favorite characters that were added to this game. Obviously, I did like Eruptor and Wrecking Ball. They both, continued into this game. But we also got Pop Fizz, and he is a great addition. And if I'm going to talk about one of the giants that I like, it's probably Eyebrow. Also, just like the first game, we saw another set of Frito-Lay promotion, but this time we saw the giants as sidekicks. In my personal opinion, this is when Skylanders got good. I've been trying to come up with the best way to describe the gimmick of this game to you, and I think it might be best just to show you. Yeah, as you can see, this is really cool. This time the starter pack includes Blast Zone and Washbuckler, along with Stealth Elf. This is also when we start getting Dark Edition starter packs, which include dark variants of different Skylanders. Maybe this is a hot take, but it is the first Skylanders game that is actually fun to play, mainly because for the first time you can jump in this one. But also because the game has a really good and creative story. I really like the boss fights in this one, specifically the Mesmeralda boss fight, and the graphics have been greatly improved since Giants. The plot of this one is that Chaos uses the Evilizer, creative name I know, to turn things evil, including himself and Glumshanks, who is a character I haven't mentioned yet in this video. While this story may sound simple, it's probably the most interesting story so far. Also, yeah, they follow up on their promise of Chaos's mom from the last game. Out of all three games we have encountered so far in this series, this is easily the best. My favorite character this time are probably Rattleshake and Countdown. While we didn't see any new sidekicks this time around, we did get a full set of Happy Meal toys. We also got some for Giants, but it was always cool to see. But either way, let's go ahead and let's move on to the next game. Trap Team is not only a good Skylanders game, but an amazing game in general, and I'll go ahead and say it. This game was Skylanders at its peak, and it's easily the best in the entire franchise. This time there are three types of figures: the Trap Masters, which are basically just giants with cool weapons, Traps, which are basically just rock candy that allow you to temporarily play as villains, and Sidekicks, which are now playable for the first time. Speaking of sidekicks, this is the first Skylanders game to not feature a new version of Spyro. The closest thing we get is Spry, and a re-release of the original Spyro through Eon's Elite. Considering the series started with Spyro, I find it interesting that he is missing from the series. Now let's talk about the villains and the traps. There are lots of different villains in this game, a few standouts being the Chompy Mage and Sheep Creep. Yes, you can play as Sheep Creep, I told you that would be important later. And in case you were wondering why this sheep is considered a villain, trust me, you don't want to know. Another interesting playable villain in this game is Chaos, which you can only play as if you have the Chaos Trap. This game also saw the addition of the light and dark element. I don't have much to say about it, but I did want to note that they're here. The story for this game is basically the Skylanders version of the Sinister Six have escaped from prison and it's your job to defeat them. All in all, it's a very good game, the best in the series, the gameplay is fun, the story is good. I like Sheep Creep and I like Eruptor, specifically the little mini Eruptor. Also, Food Fight's pretty cool, he comes in the starter pack. And they added a balloon to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, so that was cool. With this being such a good game, I'm sure you were wondering how it's possible for them to follow it up in the next game and to make it even better, and well, yeah, it isn't better. The gimmick of Skylander Superchargers is cars, and admittedly, it is a huge downgrade from Trap Team. However, there is one interesting part of this game I want to talk about, and that's their collaboration with Amiibo. It was clear in the early 2010s that Nintendo wanted their own Toys to Life experience. First, they tried with Pokemon Rumble U, and ultimately, they would see the most success with the launch of Amiibo. I'll avoid talking too much about Amiibo because they'll probably get their own video one day, but what you need to know for this video is that Superchargers added 4 Amiibo into the game as playable characters. Donkey Kong, Bowser, and 2 Dark Edition variants were all added to the game. When people talk about the fall of the Skylanders series, I think this game plays a huge role, not because it's a bad game, but because it fails to live up to the hype of Trap Team and Swap Force. My favorite characters added in this game are Donkey Kong and Bowser, and also, the promotion, well, they had a 3-season TV show on Netflix called Skylanders Academy. Admittedly, I didn't really watch it. They also had a comic book. A bunch of stuff was going on at this time, in between Superchargers and Trap Team. But either way, let's go ahead and let's talk about the last game. So I finally made it to the last Skylanders game, and this one is interesting. This game feels to me like a follow-up to Swap Force and Trap Team way more than Superchargers. For starters, many villains that were previously playable through Traps now have their own figures, and I'll say it's kind of funny that most of these figures are now bigger than the Giants, so I don't really understand what the point of Giants are at this point. It also adds the ability to create your own Skylanders, which feels like the obvious next step after Swap Force. The only real problem I have with this game is that the series has clearly lost its magic at this point. With the games being released yearly and so many competitors at this point, the problem wasn't that Skylanders had gotten boring, but that Toys to Life as a concept had. But with that being said, the best characters in this game were Chompy Mage and Crash Bandicoot, Oh yeah, I guess I didn't really mention that, but Crash Bandicoot was added to this game. He also appeared in the recently mentioned TV show. As promotions for this game go, there weren't that many, so I just kind of want to talk about some Skylander stuff we've seen pop up recently. We've seen the U2's figures. We've seen like a reference to Skylanders in Astro Bot, and also we recently got a remake of the original Spyro trilogy. And with that being said, I guess the video's kind of come to an end. Skylanders has kind of been forgotten about as a series, and while I'm hopeful that eventually we get another game, it kind of seems unlikely. Either way, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye, guys.